Hi folks, my name's Darren. Welcome to another episode of Does It Bass? Today we're going to be looking at one of the things that I think is most useful for any bass player, whether that be live or in the studio. And that's using split or parallel paths. Now, these demonstrations will be based around the Line 6 Helix functionality, but the principles themselves can apply to away from the Line 6 Helix, such as if you've got a normal pedal board with normal stomp boxes on them, and thus can apply to any bass rig. But if there is anything within the demonstrations that I feel you would need to use the Helix for something like this, or if you need any special gear to achieve it, such as any stomp boxes, A/B switches, etc., I'll be sure to let you know and I'll give you my personal recommendations based on my experience of using those items. But I should let you guys know from the off that I actually have no paid affiliation with any of the companies that I will mention. Everything is down to my personal experience with the products and how I've used them to achieve these sounds. Just a quick bit of housekeeping before we get into it. My intention was to try and upload something every week, but unfortunately I chose a very silly time to start this whole YouTube channel thing. And I started it just before Christmas, where everything was a little bit nuts in the UK. We had a lockdown, and then Christmas hit, and then we got New Year's coming up in the UK. Also, the computer I was using died a death, so I have had to source out a new computer. That thing. And it is working so much better for me than my last setup. So hopefully now the videos will come a little bit thicker and faster, and it'll be a lot easier for me to edit them and edit the sound and get everything recorded, etc. I've invested in a new audio interface, new speakers, the new computer, and I'll be getting some lighting for the workspace very soon as well. Also, a very massive thank you to my good friend Carly Rivers for being the first person to tip me on my Buy Me a Coffee account. We've been in a few bands together, he's a great drummer and he's a good friend. And yes, Callum, I did buy coffee. So if you like what I'm doing and you want to help the channel out, I'll link my Buy Me a Coffee account down below. There are some services from myself there as well, including playing a bass on your song or one-to-one preset building specifically for bass. Also, a massive thank you to everyone so far who's downloaded my Eliminate the Guitar Player presets from the Line 6 custom tone site. Between the HX Stomp preset and the Line 6 Helix Rack/LT/Floor model preset, I've got over 200 downloads and 5 stars all across the board, so thank you guys so much. And I hope you're enjoying the preset and kicking it to the guitarist whenever you can. Right, now that all that stuff is out of the way, today we'll be concentrating on things like the A/B split, Y split, and a split crossover. But what actually are these three things? So, a split Y is a basic two-way split. Now, speaking in a general context outside of the Line 6 Helix, you can send your signal evenly to two separate paths, or create a parallel path. An A/B split is where you can switch between two different signal paths. So you may have one signal path with one amp and a couple of pedals, a signal path with a different amp and a couple of pedals. You're setting up two completely effects pedal signal paths. There are so many possibilities for this one. And something that I think is unique to the Line 6 Helix, but I may be wrong on that one and I don't know the real world way of actually doing it without the Helix, is the split crossover. With a split crossover, what you're able to do is, in my example and what I will show in how I use it, is split the frequencies in two. I use everything split to 250 Hz, so that anything under 250 Hz is going to a clean path, and anything above 250 Hz is going to an affected path. So I'm talking things like dirt, chorus, phaser, envelope filter, anything to help retain that low end so that the bass just doesn't get lost, which can happen quite a lot when you're using a normal series signal path, unless your pedals have got blend knobs on them. Now, to achieve some of these tones, you will need something like a Boss LS2, a line selector 2, or one of the Electro Harmonix tri-parallel effects loop, mixer and switcher, and you can have a complete control over all the blend options. Or for a more basic, no-frills way of looking at it, you can look at things like a Fender ABY box, a Moore, an Electro Harmonix Switchblade or Switchblade Pro, and many other pieces of gear. But again, these are all the ones that I've got personal experience using and I know how to work and I get the best results out of. So first up, the basic Y split. As we said previously, one of the ways that we can use the basic Y split is to send your signal evenly to two different paths, or a parallel path. On the Line 6 Helix, you can create this effect by dragging one of your effects blocks down and creating a new path. And that will be the creation of path B. Now, the Line 6 Helix itself does default to a basic Y split when you do move one of those blocks down. But we'll go into the other options a little bit later. With a Y split, we can route our clean signal to path A and our affected signal to path B, or vice versa. And then you can actually either blend the two signals back in together to go into one path, or you can run them in stereo outs. Why is this useful? Well, in short, you can have a wet-dry signal, so that you don't actually lose the low end of your bass. My preference would usually be to run your delays, your choruses, your reverbs at about 75% mix, if your effects have got that option. Not sure if any of your drives would, or your fuzzes, or anything else, but these sort of effects usually have that mix, and I keep mine at about 75%. Whereas on the clean path, I'd usually add some form of compressor, just to even things out a little bit. Now again, if you don't have something like a Line 6 Helix, you can just use one of the ABY boxes mentioned earlier on. So to demonstrate this, I'll give two examples. The first example will be where the signals will just blend back into one, and then just going straight out into one channel, out of the Helix, into my interface, and then into a single channel into Logic. I'll also show another example of how this can work in stereo, so coming out into two separate channels, and then be recorded left and right. Okay, so here's example number one I've got of a straight Y split. Now, I'm not sure how well this is going to come across on here because I'm going to be recording this first example straight in one path. Now, if you have a look here, all I've done is nothing too fancy. I've got an amp there, which is an SVT4 Pro and 810E. Here I've put a zero bass DI in parallel, so that comes out on its own by here, but it blended back in together completely, so there's no real panning on this one. It's literally just blended straight as one signal. Didn't explain that very well, did I? you get the idea. At the start I got a compressor just to sort of even things out, as it were. Always have a compressor at the start of my chain anyway. So yeah, let's jump on to my DAW and press record and see what we can do here. Okay, so this example here, what I've done in HX Edit is I've changed the signal path so that this path is running into a separate output. I've panned this hard right and this hard left, which is just my amp. So what you should hear is on one side, you should hear just the amp, and on the other side, you should hear just the 0 amp bass DI, giving two different tones. So on the Helix, what I've done is I've set up a preset with a switch on the controller to switch between path A and path B. Yes, I could use snapshots for things like this, but I do like to use my Helix in Stompbox mode quite a lot for my bass playing. And this will also help compare it to an actual proper pedal board with multiple Stompboxes. The sort of gear you could use for this would either be, if you've got a Helix, you can do it quite easily. You could use one of the Electro Harmonics tri-parallel effects loop mixers, and that's a really long name, guys, come on. Or a Boss LS2. With these two pieces of gear, it'll either allow you to add an effects loop to your signal chain, or add a clean blend back into your signal path. One with the two signal chains merging into one, still being able to switch between one or the other, and again the other one sending the signal to two different inputs. And what I'll do is I'll actually pan each signal to either side, left, Right. Okay, so in the first example of the ABY, what I've got a rock track set up. Now halfway through what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch from path A to path B. Now path A has just got a compressor, a Tima, and a chorus on it, all gone into the SVT4 Pro and 810 cab. And then the second path is just a Vermin distortion. So I've got this set up on a foot switch that will allow me to switch from path A to path B to get either sound. So just as a quick demonstration. So you're not going to be able to see the switch on the HX Edit, but I will ping it up when I've made the switch, and you'll hear it anyway. This one is just going directly into the front of the amp, and we're going straight into one channel. And in this second example, what I'm going to do is I've added an amp block to the second path, just so the overdrive doesn't get there and nasty, as we looked at last week. Again, I've got this hard pan left and right. So what you hear is on one side, you'll hear the slight drive chorus and amp, and on the other side, you'll hear the Vermin distortion and the amp again. Same amp as I've been using the whole time. Here we go. Now, as I said, my personal favourite is actually the split crossover on the Line 6 Helix. And this has been my absolute go-to for all the time I've had a Helix. Both for my personal playing at home, out gigging, you know the drill. What this allows me to do, as I said previously, is send anything below about 240 or 250 Hz to a clean signal path, and then having everything above those frequencies affected by my effects. I do use a bit of compression on the clean path, but all I achieve with this is just keeping that nice low end intact while everything above that is being mangled by a fuzz or a drive or chorus, phaser, etc, etc. But then that low end is still present in the mix and doing what it needs to do in the band. But what I'll do for this one is I won't actually send everything into a pan stereo path. I'll record it in stereo, but I won't pan it as such, just so you can get that idea of what the signal would sound like in reality. That nice clean low end, and then everything else affected on top of it. As I've mentioned a couple of times already, my personal favourite type of split is the split crossover, which can be found on the Line 6 Helix. Now, again, as I've explained my reasons why for this, I can actually split the frequencies to two different paths. So right here, I've got anything above 240 go into this path, and anything below go into this path. All I've got here is a deluxe compressor. I've boosted it quite a bit to give the low end a bit more oomph in there. I've got a Minotaur, I've got a chorus at about 75%, and I've just got a plate reverb at about 33%. Now, I know earlier on I did say that I like my reverbs quite high. That was just me buggering up what I was saying. My reverbs I like to keep low, because if you get it too high, it'll be too washy and too messy, so sorry about that. Ignore me on that point. Keep your reverbs low, unless you like it really wet. No, there's nothing special going on here. It's just a straight blend back in before the amplifier, so it's getting both signals. But what we should hear is the top end being affected by these three effects here, and then the low end just still being there, giving it that oomph. So the track I've got set up for this is sort of a soft rock sort of song. And what you should be able to hear in this is all the affected signal clear and present, but the bass is there as well. And it still retains that oomph and that low end that needs to be there. So, let's hear how it sounds. as with everything else, all of this is down to preference and what you need to do to get the job done. As mentioned, my preference is the split crossover for bass, but I do use the Y split as well. I get the best results out of these, and it's what I use on a regular basis. They work best for what I do, and I find I get the best results with these methods, rather than having everything in series and my low end going bye-bye. And another thing to consider, with these ideas, bass players are no longer limited to trying to find bass-specific effects pedals. For a long time I had to try and source the bass-specific version of a pedal, or of any other effect that I wanted, just so I didn't sacrifice the fundamental sound of the low end, in order to have some snazzy overdrive or other random effect. With these ideas, you can use literally any effects pedal, or even rack gear, anything with or without a blend or mix control, and still have your sweet, sweet low end fulfilling the role of the bass, and in some aspects, enhance it. Now, on the Helix, the majority of the effects are all modelled on things that are marketed towards guitar players. But with everything that we've shown today, the lack of a blend or a mix control will no longer be an issue, and you won't have to worry about losing that low end when you're looking at that souped up overdrive pedal that you've been looking to take for a spin for quite some time. Anyway, that's it from me this week. Thanks very much if you stuck around. Thanks to everyone who's subscribed so far. Do the usual thing, like, share, subscribe. Let's liven the comment section up a little bit, and let's have some conversations. Also, again, if you like what you see, make sure you check out my Buy Me a Coffee account, which will be linked below. But until next time, guys, thanks very much. Bye! Maybe I should start a Buy Me a Beer account. Oh, shh!